Welcome, viewers and listeners, to the Total Football Analysis EPL podcast. We are the Thinking Fans podcast. Each week, we get together with our besties, who are current pro players, real coaches, academics, and stat heads. In the end, we want to leave you with 3 or 4 cool, thoughtful bits about football. Today, I'm joined by Coach David Seymour. To the new Newcastle owners, please stop calling him. He is under contract with us, though there is a special break clause for West Ham. I am joined by Harshal Patel, the hardest working football analyst and breakdancer I know. Finally, I am joined by Daniel Prock, a professional striker who will soon be making dreams come true as the USL resumes play in July. Our 009 will be in action soon. I'm host Chris Mumford, known as the Professor. Bella ciao. In this pod, we share our cool things to know about the Premier League this week. Next, I'll ask the podsters vexing questions. We need answers. We discuss that awkward subject of who will be coming out of contract at the end of July. What will happen? Finally, I ask our podcasters to go all PreCog, aka Minority Report movie, and ask them to predict the rest of the season. Let's turn our attention to cool things to know this week. I'm going to start off with talking a little bit about what is analytics and how does it fit in. So analytics is commonly known as stats and numbers and maybe doesn't reflect what reality is. But I look at it a different way, and I think the rest of soccer is looking at it, or football is looking at it a different way. First of all, instead of sending scouts to 35 or 40 games, the first generation of innovation is taking video. So then that same scout can watch 30, 35 or 40 clips worth of games in the same amount of time it would take for him to go travel and watch one game. So as a result, that scout becomes a lot more efficient. It's a force multiplier. So video analysis has been really important in the last few years. What's happening now is that next generation of analysis where we can aggregate the numbers, and what takes someone to look at 2 hours worth of video, a analyst can take a look at numbers that have come from the video and do quick sorts, which would take hours to look on video. They can run a sort in minutes. So the idea is that analytics does not replace the eye test face-to-face. It does not replace video analysis, but it's another tool in the toolbox. And I think where football is moving to is we want to find out what reality is as quickly as possible, and we want to make adjustments and adapt, because that's how teams and species thrive, is that adaptation. So if we find out what reality is as quickly as possible, and if you are a manager or a coach or even a fan that uses all those tools, I think you get to see reality in different ways. David, what's your take on that, as well as what is the gold standard for football analytics now?
I think it's really interesting what you say about video analysis, and obviously it makes things, as you say, much more efficient. I think at the same time, though, there's still the trade-off where seeing players live allows you to see the pitch throughout the whole time. It's very difficult to have a wide view for watching video analysis where you can see the entire pitch. But also scouts will be looking at players' behavior before the games, after the games, when they're not on the ball, all those kinds of things as well, which are harder to see in video analysis. So as much as it is really useful, it's important to have a balance. I think when we talk about, and I know Daniele is going to move on to this as well, there are some things within analysis that are very basic that you need to just have a general grasp of. So I know we're going to talk about expected goals in a little bit, and that would be defined. I mean, Harshal made a point off camera earlier where he said that different websites have different definitions of how they work out what the expected goal value. But if you're unaware of what expected goals are, it's essentially just dividing the pitch up into lots and lots of little like grids as such, and it's the probability of scoring from that part of the pitch. That's the overall sort of like definition. So, for example, the penalty spot is generally you get assigned a 0.75 expected goals, or you've got a 75% chance of scoring from the penalty spot, which is the highest expected goal value there is. So that means 3 in every 4 shots from that location go in. So that's how they would work out the expected goals from different locations.
Super. So analytics really it's basically an automation tool. So it creates synthetic time, as one analyst described to me, as well as it's a force multiplier, meaning you can use this to figure out what's working in one league or with a certain type of player, and then you can apply it to other areas. So like technology and everything else in life, it is automating things, and it is creating a full force multiplier effect. Harshal, can you give us some examples of how XG and some surprises that we've seen this season so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the Premier League, there are 2 teams who have actually underperformed their expected goals tally for the season quite significantly. One of them is Sheffield United, the other is Everton. Now, Sheffield United are in 7th place in the table. They've done a lot better than everybody thought they would be doing. They're challenging for a spot in Europe. Everton, on the other hand, are down in 12th place under Carlo Ancelotti this season. They've underperformed to what most people would have thought, but they can still make a bit of a run and maybe get into the Europa League spots. But in general, they have underperformed. So the broader story is one team has outperformed its expectations from the season. The other team has not. But when you look at the story with regard to expected goals, both teams are scoring a lot less than the expected goals tell us. So if I look at Everton, for example, and before I get into that, so just to set a base, the league average, so the average expected goals for all the teams in the Premier League this season has been 41.46, and the expected goals per shot in the Premier League at the moment is 0.12, which basically means that there's basically about less than 1% or 0.12 is the average value of a shot taken in the Premier League this season. Now, if you look at Everton, their expected goals tally has been 44.2, which is higher than the league's average, but they've only scored 37 goals. So they're underperforming it by about 7 goals. And the reason for this is that sort of underperformance hasn't spread out throughout the squad. The 2 highest scorers in the Everton squad, who are Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison, are actually performing in line or actually exceeding the expected goals for their individual expected goals tally. So Calvert-Lewin has scored 13 goals. His non-penalty XG is 13.5. Richarlison has scored 10 goals in the league this season. His non-penalty XG is 7.7. So those 2 are not really to blame for Everton's sort of overall underperformance as with regard to the XG. It's the rest of the goal scorers or the rest of the players in the Everton squad who haven't really lived up to their billing in terms of scoring goals. The likes of Theo Walcott, Gylfi Sigurdsson, Moise Kean, Alex Iwobi have all scored a lot less than what the numbers would suggest that they should have. This is the reason why Everton are underperforming their XG. Whereas if we come to Sheffield United, it actually, as unfortunate as it is, it actually boils down to one player. So Sheffield United have an XG of 40.01. They've scored 30 goals. So that's a good 10 goals less than the XG would have you believe. However, their XG per shot is 0.156. So the average value of a shot taken by Sheffield United this season is a lot more than the average value of a shot in the entire league. So why are they haven't they scored? The short answer is the fact that their strikers have just not been up to the mark. David McGurk has missed 15 big chances in the league this season. He's 5th highest in the league for this, and he scored 0 goals from an expected goals tally of 7.19. That basically accounts for the majority of Sheffield United's underperformance. Ollie McBurney, who's also another striker who has played quite a bit for Sheffield United this season, has missed 10 big chances. He has 4 goals from an XG of 6.7. So just those 2 players have more or less are the reason for almost all of Sheffield United's underperformance in front of goal this season. So it's basically the story with Everton is that while their two biggest goal scorers have scored more or as much as you would have expected them to, the rest of the squad has not backed them up. But with Sheffield United, it's been the fact that the guys leading the line haven't scored enough, haven't done well enough, and that's basically why they've underperformed. And it's only when you dive into the numbers that you can get this sort of detail out.
Coach, how could you take that information and apply that onto the pitch?
I think if you so firstly, I think it's a great point from Harshal. And what's interesting to put it in context, Sheffield United's 0.156 expected goals is the second highest in Europe's top 5 leagues. Only PSG have a higher expected goals per shot. So they are creating really good chances. And Harshal was absolutely right. And if I'm being cynical, and if I was an agent who had an upcoming young European talent who was a good finisher, I would be trying to sell them to Sheffield United as a stepping stone onto our next club because they're crying out for an elite finisher, and we could see them go. It's incredible to say Sheffield United perhaps underperforming. I think if I was from a coach's standpoint, you need to break down why they're underperforming. So it's the obvious thing to look at the actual shooting, but I would be looking at movement. I would be looking at final touch before a shot or first touch before a shot. Those sort of things are huge in actually creating a realistic scoring opportunity.
Super. Well, Daniele, let's drill down a little farther on this. You are an actual striker. Give us your take on this, and what surprises are you seeing in terms of strikers in the league?
So speaking of elite finishers, we're gonna first look at some individual strikers' expected goals per 90 against their goals per 90. So we have Arsenal's Aubameyang. He has an XG of 0.37 and goals per 90 of 0.62. So there is a 0.25 difference there. He's followed by Man City Aguero. Aguero has a XG per 90 of 0.74 and a goal per 90 of 0.97. And obviously by Leicester's Vardy, that has a XG per 90 of 0.5, and he scored 0.72 per 90. On the other side, we have Batshuayi, who has an XG per 90 of 0.67, but he really disappointed in converting this XG per 90 into goals because his goals per 90 are only 0.29. And I think he scored only 1 goal this season. Another 2 strikers who disappointed, I guess the XG per 90 will be Firmino. He's got an XG per 90 of 0.44 and a goal per 90 of 0.28. And then we have Raul Jimenez with an XG per 90 of 0.55 and actual goal per 90 of 0.45, which is striking to me because Jimenez has really impressed me this year. And he's also such a hardworking player that I kind of feel bad putting him in this category.
Jimenez is a terrific talent, and he's done phenomenally this season. I think he's performing at the sort of upper echelons of his potential. If we combine both his expected goals and assists, he has 21.14, which is the highest in the Premier League. And if we put him in context with the top 5 leagues, only Mbappe, Immobile, Werner, and Lewandowski actually have a higher expected goals and assists, which means he has a higher expected goals and assists than even Lionel Messi. Now, I'm saying he's performing at the upper echelons is that all of those players that I've just mentioned are all outperforming their expected goals and assists, whereas actually Jimenez is slightly underperforming. He's got 19 goals and assists in the league. So that's why I would say he's probably right at the top of his game right now.
So what I think is really interesting about this is, in data, we talk about separating the signal from the noise. And then we have to take that signal and be able to tell a story so people can change their workflows or their flows on the pitch, right? So, Daniele, I think those are really good commentary. It'd be fascinating to hear what their individual coaches are trying to either make those adjustments if they're underperforming, or continue to do whatever the folks are doing that are overperforming, right? Because at the end of the day, these are probabilities. These are expected, right? So if you did this 100 times, you're going to come up with different outcomes. You're going to have a narrow range, which is going to happen often and often. But to me, I think we in the podcast and in general want to figure out, how do we find the signal in the noise? How do we take that signal and tell it to a story that someone can say on the pitch where players understand how to change outcomes?
I
Because
think it's so important to provide context to data. And I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is they just look at statistics and go, oh, that player is good, or that player is not good. But you need to get used to reviewing footage and looking at the smallest details in the footage to really understand why something is the way it is, rather than just accepting it for a stat, for a number on a page.
And I'll say two things about the expected goals. First, there are so many variables, right? How the ball bounces, who do you have in front of you, next to you, how far away from goal. And then the second thing I wanted to say about Firmino and Jimenez, that yes, they, in terms of numbers, I guess they underperform their expected goals, but they do so much work for their team. They run around forever, really. They create a lot of chances. Firmino, we know he often acts as a false nine. So it's not really, like you said, David, context is just massive. We have to put these numbers in context, because I'm sure the club would not trade Firmino just because he's got a lower goals per 90 than expected goals per 90.
And keep in mind the sensitivity to the numbers. If he had put 2 more goals or 3 more goals in so far this season, I would imagine his numbers could be well above expected goals, and we'd be talking about how well he's doing. So, and I do think that roles are really important. David, I love your comment about context is everything. Speaking about context, I do want to give fair play in this podcast. We've been talking a lot about strikers. I want to get back to my favorite topic, which is goalkeepers. So the range of goals on goalkeepers of the top 8 teams is 11 to 36. Guess who has the least shots on goal against them and the most shots on goal against them? Who wants to guess that?
It's just the Premier League or all?
Premier League.
Alisson.
Alisson is probably the fewest shots on target.
Okay, and the most?
Dubravka, I think, right?
Yeah.
Of the top 6 here, it's actually.
Oh, apologies.
Sorry, the top 8. It's Leno.
My guy.
So Alisson had 55 shots, and Leno had almost 3 times as many shots as him. 100.
That's not really a commentary on Leno. It's more a commentary on how bad Arsenal's defense has been.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. So the range of goals between the top 8, the goalkeepers of the top 8 teams, is 11 to 36, almost 3x. Now, of course, unsurprisingly, Alisson is number 1 with the least number of goals, and Leno has 36, which is the most. And I just can't get over that. Poor Leno has to do 3 times as much work as Alisson.
With his legs.
With his legs, which we know you're a huge fan of, and probably because you dislike that greatly when you're trying to score on keepers and they sweep you. But when you look at goals compared to expected goals, guess who the 3 best performers are of those 8 teams? Anybody?
Is Alex McCarthy up there?
No.
I don't think he'd be in the top 8 though. You've only looked at the top 8 teams in the league, right?
That's correct. Yeah, ones that are basically Europa and Champions League.
Okay, apologies.
So I'd say Alisson, probably Kasper Schmeichel, and then I don't know. I don't think De Gea would sneak in there, but
I don't know. Chris, put us out of our misery.
probably Dean Henderson.
All right.
Probably Dean Henderson.
So the short of it is, Alisson more or less has performed as expected, right? He's coming in right around 100% of what his expected goals are. Third place, believe it or not, is Leno. He had expected goals of 43. He only had 36 actual goals.
Where is Chris Darwin on this?
So he saved an unexpected number of goals of 7. That's a pretty significant number. So the folks that are paying the bills at Arsenal, they're getting good money out of Leno. Number 2 on the list is Kasper Schmeichel. He has 35 expected goals, which is a big number considering where Leicester is, and there's only been 28. So he saved basically 81%.
Chris, can I take a guess at the last one now that you've gone through it?
Well, and to give Schmeichel credit, he also has a whopping 87 unexpected goals. Number 1 on the list, which I think we've come to, is Henderson from our good friends at Sheffield United. He was expected to have 30 goals, and only 22 have been scored on him. So he is performing 25% better than expected, and he saved an unexpected goals of 8, which I would argue would make him close to an MVP of Sheffield United in terms of how many people are preventing. A goal is still a goal. A created goal equals a prevented goal, as far as I can tell. So fascinating story. I still hold by my view that Schmeichel deserves the best of pre-COVID, largely because Leicester is in the Champions League run, and Sheffield United is in the Europa. So, and maybe next week we'll talk about distribution. Any comments from the peanut gallery?
I'm surprised by that. That was interesting. But you know what? When I said I kind of guess, I was going to go with Lloris. Have we counted Tottenham in that sort of big 8, as it were?
I'm going to be honest with you. I did not, and I readily admit that Lloris would move up the charts pretty significantly.
Yeah, okay.
He has saved Tottenham from a miserable season to just a bad season. That'll be something we'll talk about in subsequent podcasts. But
Sure.
Props to Lloris, who most people last year thought he was done. Right?
Yeah, I did. I must admit, I thought he was coming towards the end. So fair play to him.
He's been a real performer.
Mm-hmm.
So enough about goalkeeping, even though I'm crazy about it. I want to start the next segment, which is basically what we call, let me ask you a question. So I want you to help me figure out the signal and the noise here. What's real and what's not? Daniele, question number 1. Is Leicester the real deal? Are they going to be able to hold their spot in the Champions League or not?
Well, Chris, the short answer is yes, and I'm going to tell you why. When you get to the final stretch of the season, you're in the locker room and players look up to those teammates that have been there before. If we look at Leicester roster now, you have players like Schmeichel, Chilwell, Albrighton, Vardy. They won the 2015-2016 EPL season, so they know what it means to be there. They know how to not go through emotions when season is about to end and you have to clinch, in this case, a Champions League spot. And also, if we look at numbers of Leicester this season, they have scored 2 goals per game. And that is higher than the 2016 season when they scored 1.7 goals per game. They are doing slightly worse than the championship season of 2016 defensively. So now they've considered 1.03 goals per game versus the 0.95 of that magic year. And they also scored more on counterattacks now than the season of 2016. Right now they have 7 goals on off of counterattacks versus the 6 of 2016. But let me tell you something. As we talked about before, Liverpool and Man City, they just raised the bar for the top teams. If you think about Leicester in 2016, they won the league with 81 points, followed by Arsenal with 71. And last year, Man City won with 98, and Liverpool were runners-up with 97. So after all of this reasoning, yes, Chris, Leicester is a real deal.
I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to respectfully disagree with you there, Daniele.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they are more volatile in terms of results than a lot of teams around them. They've won 5 games this season in the Premier League by 1 goal, and they've lost 5 games in the Premier League this season by 1 goal as well. So I think those are games which could have gone either way. It could have potentially been a draw, or the result could have gone to the other team. And if we look at expected points, which we mentioned last week when we talked about City and Liverpool, Leicester are actually down in 6th in the expected points table with 46.7 points. That's just under 7 points less than what they actually have.
I'll tell you something. When when it comes down to those games, when a team knows how to win, they will win, and they will not care about expected points. Oh, was I supposed to win? Was I supposed to lose? So I think that the experience of that core group of those 4 or 5 players that I mentioned, it will help a lot with winning games, even if it's just by 1 goal. Even if that means scoring 1 on counterattack and then defending. If you have to bag those 3 points, I think they will.
I think they're a top 6 team. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't think they're a top 3 team. I think they've outperformed their expected goals this season, and they've outperformed their expected goals again. So it shows that they're playing really well. They've been in great form throughout the season, but it wouldn't surprise me if they don't have significant investment in the summer, which I doubt there'd be many teams with. Wouldn't surprise me to see them around sort of 7th or 8th next season, particularly given their likely involvement in the Champions League.
Well, I'm focused on the here and now, and I'm going to disrespectfully disagree with both of y'all. The truth is that 3/4 of that team wasn't there during the championship run. That being said, I've got one word for all y'all, and that's Vardy. It seems like Vardy needs 1 or 2 chances to convert those to goals. I think that Kasper Schmeichel does provide a leadership to an otherwise pretty young team. They're one of the youngest teams in the EPL. And I like their long-term prospects, but I'm focused on the here and now. I think they stay at number 3 because they keep doing what they're doing. And quite honestly, I think the other guys end up stumbling along the way. But let's go ahead and move to the next topic, which, David, speaking of stumbling, will they recover from their big stumble this year, which is Arsenal? Give us your take on Arsenal.
Yeah, I think Arsenal's a big project. I think they need a lot of investment, and I don't know if that's necessarily going to come. I think I think there's a good chance that they lose Aubameyang. Is his contract up this summer?
Or not this summer. I think it's up next summer.
That's correct.
So he's probably going to...
So they need to make that sort of decision to sell him or not this summer.
Yeah, and they may do what they did with Van Persie, where they take that sort of cut price deal. But at the same time, if they haven't got the money to replace those goals, for me personally, I'd be tempted just to keep him for an extra year.
Yeah.
And a lot of noises are that Lacazette is also going to be on the way out. So it's a time of real overhaul. The David Luiz experiment didn't work, and that's going to finish this summer as well. I think that Arteta just needs a summer of putting his ideas into place. It's a relatively different style to what we've seen from when they were with Unai Emery. I think they're looking to progress the ball a little quicker than they did under Emery. And I think Arsenal fans are willing to be patient with Arteta, but I would say to a point. And I think that the more time that goes on, the more people realise what a phenomenal job Arsene Wenger was doing at Arsenal. And I think that was a real sad way to see how that ended. We spoke about it a couple of weeks as well. Now, Arsenal, they're in 9th place in the league right now, but actually the only teams that are below them on expected points are Palace, West Ham, Norwich, Newcastle, Bournemouth and Villa. But that's not really the company that you'd expect to see Arsenal in. So if anything, Arteta should be commended for, I guess, actually having them outperform where perhaps they should be. But it'd be an interesting summer to see what happens at the Emirates. They are going to need to bring players in. And we've said this so many times, we don't really know what's going to happen this summer in the transfer window because we don't know what clubs are going to have money. But having seen how sort of reluctant to spend Arsenal have been, even when they have had the money, I don't see them bringing too many players in.
And David, as a player, I'm definitely echo what you said about Arteta needing time to transmit his concepts to the player.
Yeah.
As a player, you really need to work with a coach for quite a long time before you really assimilate what he wants from you. So, like it happened with Guardiola and Man City, even with Liverpool, we're really seeing the results in this past couple of years. So, as a player, I can definitely say that you need to train a lot. You need to spend a lot of time with your coach before you really do what he is asking you. And I'm sure that you can say that for coaches as well.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that unfortunately the way football is, particularly the Premier League, is that managers don't get a great deal of time. Now, let's just say Aubameyang and Lacazette leave this summer. Let's just say that I think that they still have key pieces that they can build a team around. I think Martinelli. I wasn't on the Martinelli train at first, but you know what? I'm fully on board with a first-class ticket now. I think he's an excellent player and someone that they need to build that team around. Guendouzi is good. He's not consistent. However, he's still young. He's got plenty of potential. I think there's going to be a little bit of interest in Torreira this summer because I'm not sure if he's going to be a significant starter under Arteta, particularly as Arteta's put so much faith in Xhaka. So we could see personnel changes throughout, but I still think there are pieces in that team to build around. Kieran Tierney, the last one I'll mention, Kieran Tierney has all the potential to be an outstanding left back, but I'm concerned about that shoulder injury that has just bugged him since he's been in the Premier League. I was at the West Ham Arsenal game where he did it again just after coming back. And from my playing days as well, I've seen enough shoulder injuries where you know when someone's got a serious issue there. So that's one to keep an eye on. I don't know if he's a long-term option for Arsenal left back. I don't know if he's going to be able to stay fit.
I tell you what I'm vexed by is last year the needs were screaming help in defense, and they went out and spent a bunch of money on Pepe. We know how that's come along. And I think Pepe will get better. There's no question, but
100%.
Why not take that money they spent on him and spend $35 million on two quality backs?
It's an issue.
Fair though, they did spend. Sorry, go on, David.
I'm just going to say it's an issue Arsenal have had for years. We're not properly investing in centre backs, and I mean, Rob Holding, for example, I don't think that he is a player of that quality. And I think that's a player who's been there for too long without showing enough promise. And I think he's probably a Premier League centre-back. But do you know what? If he's available this summer, you will still not have Premier League clubs queuing up at Arsenal's door to sign Rob Holding, which tells you enough about him as a player.
Right.
But to be fair, though, I mean, Arsenal did spend, I forget how much they spent. What was it, about 20 or 30 odd million on William Saliba? And they loaned him back to St. Etienne, and he's going to come in the summer, and he's very highly rated. So they got him in. They got Pablo Mari on loan in January, which is going to be made into a permanent deal, and he's a left-sided centre-back. So they have two very young, potentially very good centre-backs who will be available for the next season as well. So you've got Pablo Mari and William Saliba. And they can raise some cash by selling Socrates and David Luiz as well, I guess. Although, no, David Luiz is out of contract, but they'll probably Mustafi and Socrates, one, if not both of them, are going to be out.
I don't like Kolasinac either. I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't seen enough from Kolasinac to suggest that he's a top six, Arsenal should be aiming to be a top 4 club. Kolasinac is not a top 4 player. I'm sorry. Not having that.
Well, good. Well, let's switch gears. Harshal, tell us your take on ManU. Where are they now? What are their prospects?
I think they're a bit better in terms of prospects. United might be a bit better off right now than what the situation was pre-COVID, because Paul Pogba and Marcus Rashford are back and they will be available to Solskjaer for the last 8 or 9 odd games. And that does bring a lot of quality into the team. United were really struggling when Rashford got injured. A few players did step up. Bruno Fernandes coming in January has helped a lot in terms of the creativity. But there was a bit of a goal-scoring void that was left when Rashford got injured. But he's back. He's apparently fit and firing in training and all of that. So you've got Martial, you've got Rashford up front. Mason Greenwood has done well whenever he's played this season. So The goal scoring is there, potential is there, and then you have the potential of Bruno Fernandes and Paul Pogba playing, in tandem in midfield. So United could just put together, and to be honest, this is the remainder of the season is literally going to be like a fresh season, right? I mean, all the form and the way you've played in the previous 29 odd games is not going to matter. It's basically a mini season of 9 games now. So United, I think, have the players now. We basically could put together a run and make it into the top 4. And I mean, there could be a case where United, even if they finish 5th, could play in the Champions League because of City's 2-season ban. If that does get ratified, United could still make it to the Champions League, being where they are. But they're just 3 points behind Chelsea. They're 8 points behind Leicester. So with 9 games to go, if they can put together a run with the guys that are coming back into the team, I think they have a good chance of making it into the top 4.
Good. David, what's your? I think we're all in large agreement on that, right? I mean, I think the open question is the Pogba Fernandes pairing.
Yeah.
How much time will it take for them to work? Because that's going to be the real engine room there. And really, how long is it going to take for Rashford to get, quote, fit and just have the confidence on making the runs he made in the past, given, backs are just so doggone tricky.
I think the Pogba, you're absolutely right. The Pogba-Fernandes relationship is key. And as we've said, even with like the managers, giving them time, it's the same thing with players. It's going to take time to gel without a question. But what you have is you have 2 world-class talents there. I would like to see Pogba played in a pivot role with Fernandes, and I think McTominay in front as a ball winner. I think that you need the ball winner with those 2 to allow them to both dictate the play how they can. So I think we talk about those 2, but I think McTominay is incredibly important for getting the best out of those 2. So I'd be looking to see Solskjaer operate with a sort of midfield 3 that, Pogba's technique is just out of this world. And I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing him play, hopefully in a deeper role, and allow him to orchestrate the play, switching the ball. You can really get the United fullbacks to push up higher, almost into wing-back roles, if Pogba decides to maybe drop in between the United centre-backs. So I'd be interested to see how Solskjaer uses Pogba. And again, with Rashford, I think with any of these players is that form goes out the window, and because it's essentially a new season. So it's going to take him time to get back to where he was. He needs a consistent run of games. And unfortunately, we're at the business end of the season where perhaps if he's not initially performing straight away, he may not get that run of games that he needs to play himself in. Every point right now matters. So Solskjaer will be evaluating this throughout the training. I read as well this week that teams will have the option to organise friendlies before the season starts. I don't know if that's already happening or not. I guess we won't really.
That is happening. I mean, I think it was Chelsea.
Arsenal played against Charlton.
Yeah, Arsenal had a behind closed doors friendly against Charlton, and they beat them 6-0. Eddie Nketiah scored a hat-trick.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if they release all of the information about that, though. I wonder if there are some teams that are having friendlies without actually talking about it.
Yeah, could be.
So let's switch gears to Tottenham, David. There are a couple of injuries that folks are coming back. There's a leaky back line. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're going to have Heung-min Son back, which is really important for them. I think that's going to immediately fill the attacking void, which was missing for so much of the second half of the season. It's, again, another difficult one where managers come in, they haven't had a full summer to implement their ideas. So people are quicker to hound Mourinho than they are any other manager just because of who he is. I'm interested to see what happens with Spurs for the rest of the season. I think now that they kind of had a mini pre-season, you might see some of the different approaches that Mourinho spoke about when he first joined. We may see them look to be a little bit more positive. I think Ndombele, when he plays, is excellent, but there's those fitness issues. I don't know if Mourinho trusts him fully yet. Interested to see what Ndombele does towards the end of the season, but I'm not expecting fireworks from him. I think that they'll be looking finish obviously top half. They'll be trying to push into those European places for sure. I'm not sure if they necessarily will. So I think that Spurs fans need to be patient. See this as a transition. Give Mourinho the summer. See what happens next season. I know a lot of people don't want to give Mourinho time, but it's just because of the divisive personality.
Daniele, what's your take on the striker situation there and coming back from injury?
Sorry, I was going to say about Tottenham that from a locker room perspective, you have two things going on. First off, you have one competition only to focus on. That's the league, because we know that Tottenham was knocked out by Leipzig. And then you have to save faces, both the players and Mourinho. They went from playing a Champions League final to not even making the Europa League, maybe, according to their position. So saving faces is going to be a big motivating factor going into this last stretch of 9 or 10 games. And then in terms of coming back from injuries, it's always tough. But I feel like all players are in the same situation of coming back from a long break. So maybe in terms of Harry Kane, that's not going to be as big of a difference maker. It's not going to be in his head as much because even the other players, right, are coming off of a 2 or 3 months hiatus. So I think that Kane will be fine.
Okay, good. Well, let's switch our attention to Sheffield United. Harshel, what's your take on, are they the real deal or not?
They have been the surprise of the season, I think, in the Premier League as far as the entire season is concerned. Because I don't think anybody could have thought that they were up in 7th, and they've been discussed and dissected to no end, even on our podcast and everywhere else on our website. I think there's a bunch of articles as well that you'll find which break down how Sheffield United play. So all of that has been discussed. But I think at least for this season, they will manage to hold on where they are because it's the value of being such a well-drilled and well-coached side that they are more than the sum of their parts. I mean, you look at this, first of all, I think you can predict their starting 11 for almost any game and you'd be spot on 9 out of 10 times. They've got Sanderberg in January, and that's the only thing that sort of shook up the lineup with John Lundstrom dropping out and Berg taking his place in midfield. But that's about the only change that has happened in that lineup throughout the season. Otherwise, you can more or less name their side consistently for the entire season. And that obviously breeds familiarity that allows them to have certain patterns of play that are well established because of the same players who are playing with each other week in, week out, and it's those drills are being worked on in training. So they know how to progress the ball, they know what they need to do to progress the ball. For example, even in terms of defensive organization, just the value of playing with the same players week in, week out allows you to develop that understanding and that organization. So, and as I said, they are an extremely well-drilled outfit. They are more than the sum of their parts. So this extended break has obviously would have given them some time off. But now that they're back in training, I think Chris Wilder will be able to get them up to speed really quickly because they have that sort of base of being a good side in terms of their tactical understanding and the way they play already. So I don't think there'll be a lot of stuff there for them to catch up on in terms of the tactical and the side of things. Obviously, physically, everybody is playing catch up right now.
Yeah, I would say my take is I am great feel-good story. I'm skeptical, but seeing how their goalkeeper has way overperformed and I see some potential regression back to the mean. I just see their offense, if they're so underperforming, they're going to regress back to the mean and they're going to more than offset that. So I don't think they'll make a serious run to Champions League, but I think they'll hold their spot in Europa, and it'll be a great story that we can tell that not just the big money teams make it to Europe.
You know what though, Chris? If they do hold their position, then they are 100% the real deal because they've got difficult games in the run-in to the end of the season. They've still got to play Wolves, Chelsea, Leicester, I think United still, maybe Arsenal as well. They've got some difficult games to play. I think Tottenham, that's a difficult run-in. So, yeah, I mean, if they're there, by the end of the season, then wow, fair play to him. And I think we speak about Chris Wilder. Harshal was just saying, he'll get them up to speed, and Wilder is a shoo-in for manager of the season. And I think when you look at the players that Sheffield United have got that perhaps other teams have neglected in previous years, the three that come to my head initially, Chris Basham, Oliver Norwood, and this Mousset, three players that he's got performing excellently for them this season. So, they've got one hell of a manager, but I think that it'll be interesting to see how they manage that tough running.
Hey, you just mentioned Wolves. Are they the real deal? Are they gonna have to do what it takes to stay in Europa, and could they pop into Champions?
Do you know what? I think if you're someone listening to this podcast right now who maybe doesn't have a Premier League team yet, then if you're looking at how well run these teams are, Wolves have got to be right up there. I think their recruitment has been outstanding. Their coaching is outstanding. I love, from a fan's perspective, that they have respected their fans and given the Europa League a go. That's what every Wolves fan would have wanted to have seen. And the fact that they're still there and thereabouts right now suggests that they've actually got a lot more squad depth than perhaps we gave them credit for at the beginning of the season. I think that Wolves are a very strong team. They've actually got a slightly easier running than some of the other teams around them. They still got to play some big teams for sure. But I'd be willing to say I think that Wolves will be there and thereabouts. We spoke about Raul Jimenez earlier, and he's just one of a couple of outstanding individuals they've got. Ruben Neves is another player who I'm a big fan of. I'm sure Harshal is as well. Harshal, what's your take on Neves as a player? Do you think that he's a player that could potentially play higher up?
He's already played higher up. I mean, he came to Wolves from Porto. He was captain at Porto at, I think, 19 or 20 years of age. He's played in the Champions League. He's captained Porto in the Champions League before he came to Wolves. He's played for Portugal at, I think he played at the previous Euros as well. And even if not, he's had enough experience with Portugal as well. So he's definitely a player who can play at the Champions League level. I think it was a massive surprise for everyone when he did end up at Wolves. And obviously, you've got the whole Sheff Utd and Jorge Mendes connections there, which have got him there. But that's not to say that he's not performed. He's done extremely well for Wolves, both in the Championship and now that they are in the Premier League. So I'm a huge fan of Ruben Neves.
Question for you guys. Will Wolves be afraid of heights during this final stretch? Afraid of heights? Like not being used to being up there? Will they suffer from the lack of experience maybe?
They finished seventh last year, so
what's up?
They finished seventh last year, so
yeah. But we're talking about making a run for the Champions League spot. How would that play out?
I think they've got I think they've got enough individual experience in that side to be comfortable where they are, and I think I 100% see what you're saying there. But I just think that although perhaps the side aren't used to, let's say, going on a deep run in Europe and consistently, being in the qualification spots, I think that if you look at individual personnel, there is enough quality that have had the experience of being involved in teams that are in that kind of battle on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, good. Well, Harshal, I wanted to spend a few minutes on notable out of contracts, really potential difference makers that are going to be done. And quite honestly, they're going to have to sign them for at least a few weeks at the very least. What can you give us kind of a quick survey of who the teams and who the players are that we have to keep in mind?
Yeah. So if our listeners are not aware, at present, players whose contracts are running out on 30th of June, clubs have up till 23rd of June to agree short-term extensions with those players to allow them to finish this season. So there are a bunch of players, obviously, who are out of contract at the end of the season, who clubs are trying to sign up so that they can continue till the end of the season. But it's also a question of whether they will end up getting 1 year or 2 year deals and stay at the clubs they are at. So, for example, you've got David Luiz at Arsenal, who is being widely reported as that Arsenal will let go of him, and that will be a very expensive 1 year that he's had. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a year, right? Luiz came in the summer. Yeah. And with the agent fee and with the transfer fee that was paid and the salary, I think Arsenal would have spent north of 10 or 11 odd million on him this year. in terms of the transfer, the agent fee and the salary, and that's a pretty expensive for a player of that age and who they're now going to probably let go of. Other notable ones, you've got Ryan Fraser at Bournemouth, who said publicly that he was unsettled this year, and which is why his performance levels have dropped off. He was someone who was linked to Arsenal at the beginning of this season. That move didn't happen. He's not played well this year, but now he's literally got like a 9-game mini season to prove himself, because it doesn't look like Bournemouth are going to offer him a new deal. So he might, if he can get a better deal somewhere else. A lot of the Bournemouth players are out of contract. Actually, you've got the likes of Simon Francis, Charlie Daniels, Jordan Ibe. They're all out of contract, and you don't know if Bournemouth will offer them long-term deals, if not the short-term deals to finish off the season. Chelsea are another example where Willian, Pedro, two of their wingers who've picked up a lot of the slack this season. I mean, I say slack in terms of playing time. Nobody's really replaced Eden Hazard, but in terms of playing time, those two have played a lot. But again, they're two players who look like they're out on their way out of the club, especially because Chelsea have got Hakim Ziyech in for the summer. They've got most probably got Timo Werner in as well. So they're refreshing the squad. Willian and Pedro are both more than 30 years old, so they look like they're going to be out. Everton, I think Leighton Baines has been offered a 1-year deal, so he's going to stick around. But they've got two very high earners, Cuco Martina and Oumar Niasse. Both of them combined make over £100,000 a week, and probably going to be out of a club in the summer. Liverpool, the headline is Adam Lallana. He's been a good part of the squad they've had for about 7 years now. Not played as much as they would have liked because of injuries, but he's chipped in a lot of times when they've needed him. He's a very popular member of the squad, so he is definitely getting an extension till the 30th of June. It doesn't look like he's going to be around for next season. City, you've got David Silva who's out of contract, and you don't know yet whether he's going to stick around for next season. I think he did say that he's going to leave, but he might just be persuaded to stick around for another season. He will obviously get a deal till the end of the season, but I personally would like to see him have another full campaign in the Premier League to be sort of his swan song, because he's been one of the best players in the league over the last 10 years. Newcastle have Andy Carroll and Matty Longstaff out of contract.
I think there's bargains to be had here, though, Harsha.
Yeah, exactly. If you go through the list, there's a lot of players out there who are very good bargains on free transfers. John Lundstrom.
There are, particularly if you're like, let's say you're a lower half Premier League team looking to break into the top half, there are some good players that would immediately benefit you, but also squad players too. I mean, we talk about, let's say, Kiravella from Liverpool, who hasn't really had much of a look in, but I actually rate quite highly. You just mentioned Matty Longstaff, and the rumours are that I think Udinese have put in a crazy contract offer to him, which would make him the highest earner at Udinese. But if you're a cynic, you'll realise that it's Watford using Udinese to get an end of contract deal, and then Udinese will probably send him over to Watford.
Speaking of that, actually, I forgot. Burnley, Jeff Hendrick is out of contract. There are rumours of AC Milan in for him. Daniele, any thoughts?
Really? I did not know that.
There have been a lot of rumours going around recently that AC Milan are seriously interested in getting Jeff Hendrick in from Burnley. And that's one of the most bizarre rumours I've heard, ever.
And
it does look like it has legs.
Ngakia, the young right back from West Ham, broken into the team this season. His contract's running out because, I mean, I think he was only offered a 1-year deal last summer because they were pretty sure they were going to let him go. I think that's the situation. I could be wrong, but I mean, since he's come in, I think he's had one of the highest defensive duel win percentages per 90, or at least defensive duels per 90 since he's been playing in the league. So I think that he's a little bit of an unknown. But the other one I was going to mention for Spurs is Tanganga, who still hasn't been offered a contract that's been highly impressive for him. Or I think he's been offered a contract, but he hasn't accepted it. Either way, it's not resolved. So there could be bigger teams circling around him, particularly those that need to fulfill their homegrown quota.
So I'd like to go ahead and switch gears to our segment called the PreCog segment, which is we ask y'all to map out and tell us the story of how the rest of the season is going to play out. Daniele, can you tee us off on that?
Yeah, I would like to say something about Chelsea because we haven't talked about Chelsea so far. Lampard is a winner, so I will go ahead that he will, and I'm going to say that he will clinch a Champions League spot. As I said before, I value a lot having people in the locker room who have been there, who can offer guidance and leadership. Also, I'm a fan of his proactive football. And David, I'm gonna be honest. I looked at the West Ham schedule for the final games. You're actually in good shape. So not to jinx it to you, but you're gonna stay in the Premier League.
I've always thought you knew what you were talking about. Excellent take.
Beautiful. Harshal, what's your take on what's your precog on the rest of the season? What's going to happen?
I think, obviously, Leicester, I think Liverpool, Leicester and City are going to stay where they are. It's going to be a real fight, in my opinion, between Chelsea and United for the fourth spot. And it might not matter, obviously, because even if you finish fifth, you could play in the Champions League next season. But I can see United giving Chelsea a bit of a run. They've done well from an expected point of view as well. I mean, United are fourth in the expected points table, although they are behind Chelsea there. So I think United could give Chelsea a bit of a run, and that could be an interesting battle that we see. But other than that, lower down the table, Wolves, Sheffield United, I think will hold on. I don't think Spurs and Arsenal will be able to climb up ahead of them. So I think Wolves and Sheffield United will keep their Europa League spots. And down at the bottom, I want to see how Everton do, because I'm really interested to see how Carlo Ancelotti manages to get a tune out of that squad. They've got some really good players in there. They've got a couple of players coming back from injury, so they could make a bit of a run. It would take a lot to get them to Europa, but they could make a decent run. And in terms of relegation, Norwich, Villa, and probably Watford, I'd say, because Watford, even though they had a bit of a bounce early on when Pearson was appointed, I don't think they have enough about them to stay up, especially because Delafeu is out for the season now. So that's what I think is going to happen.
David, I see some looks of skepticism on your face. Map out what reality is going to be going forward.
You know what? I'm going to start it off by making probably the wildest take possible. And I think that here it is. You probably all disagree with this, but I think Liverpool are going to win the title.
Really? I didn't see that coming.
No, seriously. I think Watford are going to pull away. I think actually they've turned a corner under Pearson, and I think they will continue to. And I think the big relegation battle, I'm being biased, but I think West Ham will also pull away. I think the big relegation battle is going to be between Brighton and Bournemouth. I think Villa and Norwich are both going to go down. So that's where I'm seeing. That's something that I'm seeing there. I think Everton are going to have a bit of a turn of form, and I'd expect them to crash into the top half of the table. And who knows? But they're only I think 6 points off of Sheffield United, so they could make a late run themselves. But I'm expecting to see a little bit better from them. And I am going to, I think what Harshal said is probably fair. I think Chelsea probably will make the top four, but at the same time, I'm going to sit on the fence and say it wouldn't surprise me to see United squeeze it in maybe on the last game of the season.
All right. Well, let me give you my sense. First of all, I think soft tissue injuries and getting teams to click are going to lead to some crazy runs and some stunning falls. I do think that Liverpool and Man City are going to cruise along. I do think that Leicester is going to stay in their slipstream, though I think they're going to have some bumps along the way. But the reason why I think they're going to stay in the slipstream is I think ManU is going to fall out of Champions League contention. I think the Pogba-Brunes midfield isn't going to quite gel yet this season. It's going to feel like they've underperformed, though watch out for them next season. I think that Chelsea underperforms despite the gallant efforts of Giroud, who we will have for another year, though it breaks my heart if Timo comes in and takes his spot. Giroud always seems to get the short stick from those London clubs. For some reason. I think Sheffield United will move up the table, but slip just short of Champions League success, largely because I think the Wolves are going to quietly sneak in there and pip the final spot in the last 2 weeks of the season. As far as relegation goes, I think that Norwich goes on a huge tear, and they actually start delivering goals that they should have been versus their expected goals. I think the mighty Cherries end up going on the right side of the line. And I also think that Brighton, with their analytics and combination and transparency, end up squeaking through, which means our friends at Watford, Aston, and West Ham end up in the relegation zone. So that's my take on what's going to happen this season. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
David, you're not going to say anything about it.
I'll say this, Chris. I think your logic is flawed, because if you think Norwich are going to, let's say, overturn their expected points deficit, then you've got to say the exact same thing for Watford and West Ham and Brighton. All those teams.
One word for you.
Underperformed.
Pookie, I got one word. He's going on fire. He is going on fire. And admittedly, there's perhaps an emotional quotient to my piece on that. But I absolutely love their style of play. And I love their saying, we're going to be who we are. This is our authentic identity, and we are who we are, go up or go down. I got to respect that in the 21st century.
David, you're going to have to play Norwich away. So if Pookie scores a hat trick, you owe Chris a beer, huh?
Yeah, maybe. I don't see
to be fair,
that goal scoring run.
To be fair, I think Pookie was playing the second half of the season with an injury. He had a toe injury. He is fully fit now. So, I mean, I don't know. He could go back to the form where in the first, I think, couple of months of the season. You don't know. But I think, as Chris said, it's just emotional where they play a really attacking style of football, so you want them to do well. So let's see.
I think Brighton have been making the biggest noises out of all of the teams on the bottom in terms of wanting to not restart. I know West Ham haven't been great either, but I think a lot of that is down to Brighton's just horrendous form for some time now. Now, I know we said that form will go out the window, but they've still got to play Liverpool. They've still got to play Man City. They've still got to play Arsenal. They've still got to play Leicester. They've still got to play Manchester United.
Wow.
I think they are going to really struggle. And I hate to say it because, I like Brighton. I like Graham Potter, but I think they're going to get pulled in a big way to the relegation battle.
All right. I will amend my thoughts, and maybe West Ham, that London club, might be able to squeak back in. With that,
I hope so.
That easy? Chris, you changed your mind that easy, huh?
If only the actual relegation battle was decided here, on the basis of...
That is a murderer's row of talent of teams are going to have to play. That's almost an automatic 5 out of 9 loss there. So we shall see. Hey guys, I love the conversation we had today. We've got to wrap this up here. What I'd like to do is I'd like to thank Total Football Analysis. They are the world's largest open source soccer analyst community. Please visit www.totalfootballanalysis.com. Join us on our next Football Thinking Fans podcast. For now, bella ciao, ciao, ciao.